Welcome to City Cinematheque, where the art and pleasure of the movies are the subject of serious discussion. I'm your host, Jerry Carlson, and I teach film studies at the City College of the City University of New York. Today, we continue our tribute to Zeitgeist Films, a very creative film distribution company, woman-owned. Today, we're presenting the 1982 classic, The Draughtsman's Contract, written and directed by Peter Greenaway. Now, this is a recreation of some events in the late 17th century at an elegant country estate in the UK. It's a murder mystery, it's a beautiful painterly film, and it's many, many other things, including a kind of classic of postmodernist cinema. We'll be talking about that and many other things after today's screening. Joining us will be film and theater scholar Michael Cramer, who is an expert on historical reenactment. Now, take a journey back to 17th century Britain in The Draughtsman's Contract. Welcome back to City Cinematheque. I hope you've enjoyed your trip to 17th century Britain and to a rather lovely estate in which a number of rather nasty things happen. There's a lot to talk about this film, about its historical recreation, about the film style, about the performance, and other stuff. And it's a pleasure to welcome to City Cinematheque one of my colleagues from the CUNY system, Dr. Michael Cramer. Michael is a scholar of film and of theater. He's an active theater producer himself, and in addition to that, he's written extensively about historical reenactment, and a subject that couldn't be more, relevant to this particular film, which, wears its historical reenactment, I think we can say flamboyantly.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So Michael, let's start perhaps at the simplest kind of level here. We've got so many things to talk about, but just like, wow, how about those costumes?
Thanks, Jerry. It's good to be back.
Yeah.
The costumes are magnificent. They're sumptuous. They're weird.
Yeah.
They are extravagant. They are definitely over the top and ahistorical. Greenaway was very clear that he did not want accurate costuming for this movie. He wanted stuff that was way over what would normally be seen. The wigs are much higher than they should be and longer, and the jackets are much fluffier, and it's just huge.
Yeah, and it does raise this question, because we can, move on to other things like bodily movement of like, how could you live in these costumes? I mean, well, and the point is that it seems like we're in another planet of a certain kind, not just in 17th century England, but there's the way in which they're as constrained as enabled by the clothes they're wearing.
Yes, it's alien and otherworldly, I think. Everything in this film, I think, is designed to make us feel like we're looking at something that's not normal, not earthly, not real. And I think that's definitely that's part of Greenaway's strategy.
And that's a very interesting point, because you bring up that's the way in which, bizarrely enough, in a film that pays so much attention to detail, the detail is to retain that sense of the strange or the uncanny, as opposed to what I would call the normal historical film, in which the details are there to be immersive. That is, that okay, we completely buy into this, into this world. Whereas here, we're always, for many reasons of artistic strategy, we're always at a certain distance from everything that's happening.
Yeah, it's very strange for the period. The period in film history. There was a real push for realism, right, in historical films, right? Even if they weren't quite realistic, like Richard Lester's movies and things like that, right, that this movie is kind of like anti-Lester in that regard. Because whereas Lester was always about, this mise en scene that's kind of a Bruegel painting that's very rich and very realistic and dirty and ugly. And here, everything, I think Greenaway used the term, was classic and formal,
yes,
and geometric.
Very important point. So this, we're going to talk theater here a little bit for that, because, there is one of the ways of conceiving of the last couple of hundred years of Western theater history is this kind of struggle between the people who want to make things more naturalistic or realistic, whether it be even a production of The Cherry Orchard by Chekhov. Are we going in the direction of we're really going to dwell into that class at that particular, or another very, very rich strain would be the strain we would, that's allied with Bertolt Brecht and epic theater of, no, we should always be questioning all of the ways in which the motives, not only the people, but what acting itself is, what staging something itself is, what being able to understand something through cinema is.
There's a very phenomenological aspect to this movie. It points up how artificial it is in so many ways.
Right.
Particularly its use of the frame, and the way the frame for the painting, or rather the drawings, exposes the frame of the camera. It's really, really meta-theatrical.
Well, you're absolutely right on that. And I have to say that it's a film that leads you, first of all, you're saying, I've never seen a film that has as many frames in it.
Right, yeah.
And one really does think of those multiple instances you've seen, the illusionism of a frame, but with the infinite set of mirrors. Now, he never uses that exactly, because that's this spatial metaphor of the infinite number of framings. But this is this flat sense of it. Even he flattens out the three-dimensional because it's always being brought into the geometric frame, and simply how our game could be.
Right.
Find me a frame in the film that doesn't have a frame in it, and I know who's going to lose.
Right.
The person who thinks they're going to find a lot of them.
Yeah, there's so much that's odd about this movie. You probably won't find a movie with more single-point perspective in it. Right. Just a square-on shot with just looking straight down an aisle. And he sets up most of the shots that way.
Absolutely. And that's another one of the ways that, how to put this, I'm going to talk about, the normal immersive cinema, which can be from, by the way, from a Marvel comic universe to Casablanca, very different kinds of films, and most television uses reverse shot when you do conversations. Now, this is a film that paradoxically is both extraordinarily verbal and extraordinarily visual at the same time. Usually it's one, or one or the other, but his visual strategy here is to really just to reject the reverse shot of when one person's talking, now you go to the other person over the shoulder. Much was made at a certain moment in film theory of the suturing of space, the molding of space together that was done by that. And that's exactly what he's not interested in, that you're pointing out. People are either single in the frame occasionally, or they're directly addressing the camera, and when they're talking, they may be talking to one another, but they're all talking to one another within that single frame, and within the frame there are usually other frames, whether it's literally his framing device, or whether it's the symmetrically framed compositions that may just have candles, or it may have windows, or it may have this. It's like inescapably frame within frame, and people talking from inside frames among themselves, but also to us. And we're always aware of that framedness.
And it's very flat.
Yeah.
And he said several times in interviews about this film that it's very painterly. He had a number of inspirations. One was the documentary style that he was already working in. And so it was set up the camera, let it happen, and don't change. Don't make it look like it's it's a designed shot in a normal cinematic sense, but also that he wanted it to look like a painting, that it was inspired by paintings, and that he wanted to create a film that was like a painting, so it was visual more than narrative, and it captured everything that needed to be captured right within the frame.
Right. And so one of the things you were referring to is this is a transit within his career. This is a big leap transition.
Yeah.
Because he's really begun as a painter who's gotten interested in film, and the preceding work, which was not made for theatrical distribution, was made to be much more on the, I would say, the circuit of art exhibition, which is called The Falls, and has never been kind of easy to find, or you have to kind of look around for special screenings of the Falls. And so then, because your point I think is an excellent one, Michael, he then moves over into something that is being produced as a fiction feature film, and it's going to be distributed in a certain kind of way. It has 40 years ago. It has Channel 4 money in it, which was the experimental wing of BBC. But he's got to step over to actors, enactment, and to, how shall I put it? I'm not going to say creating narrative, but engaging with narrative,
right,
with storytelling.
Yeah, one of the things that I read him saying about this film was that, let me see if I can get this right. A painter paints what he sees, not what he knows. And so there is a complete kind of ignorance of subtext. Right. And that's very much in the character of the draftsman.
Absolutely.
And it's also very much in how it's shot.
So this goes back to what I think is your superb observation of that quotation, which is, he's so innocent that he can see everything but not know everything.
Right. He starts out as being the person who drives the action. Yeah, he's in total control. He orders people about, and they complain about how much control he's been given in the house. And by the end of there's a point, Greenaway talks about the point where he's drawn into the second contract, and at that point he becomes manipulated. He becomes not the driver of the action, but what is being driven. And it's exposed how incredibly naive he is about all of this.
Yeah, and so that brings up this question of the fact that we're always trying to, in a certain sense, there's a continuity of the visual style in the film. But there's not necessarily a continuity of what we assume is the underlying genre of the film. Right. Because in that first section, as you're pointing out, he is dominant, he's in control. Greenaway very much plays with this whole notion of the elegance versus his misogyny, self-indulgence, his brutality to his employer, as it were. And so you think, okay, is this going in a certain direction in that way? And the whole murder aspect has not been, introduced at this, at this point. So we're thinking, okay, so this is going to be a period drama that's going to be critical just of gender roles and of course, okay, got it,
right,
got it. And then, as you say, enters second act, as it were,
and all of a sudden, there's hints that something's wrong. Right. He's now being controlled and manipulated by the daughter, and we start to realize that something has happened in the house, that because he only paints what he sees and doesn't worry about what he thinks or knows, he doesn't see is going on. And of course, what's going on is that there's been a murder. Right. And in 4 different places that I've read, Greenaway is quoted as saying, "This is an Agatha Christie country house murder mystery."
Well, and as soon as you say it, to someone who's seen the whole film,
Right.
you know, you say, oh, now that makes sense, with, of course, the one exception that since so many things in this film are meta,
Right.
this is the meta Agatha Christie piece in which he's taking apart all of the premises,
Right.
and some of those premises being, okay, you have to have a body. The body arrives a bit late in this narrative. Okay, although there have been hints something was wrong, that he did not make it to Southampton,
Right.
you know, etc. But then you get the body, and then the way typical mysteries work is that you have suspects to find out not only who done it, but what the story behind all of this was. How does that work in this film?
Well, we find the story. We see we see it revealed. We start to think, okay, there were clues in every picture that he draws. There's a clue to the murder, and it's all been right in front of us. But just like him, we haven't seen it yet because we didn't have a body, right? And then once we have the body, if you go back and look at the drawings, you see the clues to the mystery are there. The ladder, the coat among the laundry, the boots, right? And so all of that stuff has been revealed to us, and just like the draftsman, we are ignorant of it. Right? And then Greenaway says he doesn't want to give the classic great reveal in the drawing room where everybody is gathered together and the detective, you know, reveals the story and what exactly happened. He wants the audience to figure it out. All the information is there. We have seen the motivations of all the people. We've figured out that that the daughter is trying to get him to impregnate her.
Right.
That the wife has almost assuredly murdered the husband, right? And that they're framing him up for it, and you know he still can't see that right to the end.
Yeah, I mean, in that sense, he's the single most innocent person in the entire film. Now, not by innocent, we mean without knowledge of what is actually happening around him. We don't, mean that he's morally virtuous, or anything of that kind. But, even when he's sitting out there at the end, just before they murder him, well, I can only speak for myself, Michael. I can't speak for you on this. When a bunch of guys show up at late at night with wearing masks and surround you, I'm the kind of person who gets very nervous about that. That happens to me. I'm just, call me overly suspicious or whatever. But he retains his how shall I put it? This innocent arrogance. Until the moment in which it really does him in, allowing everyone to cover up every one of the potential things that has happened.
Exactly. He is completely without agency in the second half of the film.
Right. Right. So let's talk. Let's take this in a slightly different direction, which in a certain sense loops us back to something you were saying a little bit earlier about this is a film that always has a kind of push-pull in it. We're attracted to its beauty, but at the same time we're always, that beauty is made strange. So there's as I say, a push-pull effect in that, and that's also part of it, because it does have a narrative structure. It doesn't have the reveal of the who did everything, although it's all implied. So what about how he makes it strange, both in narrative and in in dialogue, in the visual design, etc.
I think we've touched on most of it. I mean, obviously the strangest thing about it is the statue.
Well, okay, so that was clearly you've gone to the setup. So, what is the living statue doing in the film in your thought? Because it's one of the first questions many people ask about the film. We've kind of delayed that question.
I'm glad we got to it last because I think the other questions are more interesting.
Yeah,
actually.
yeah.
Well, Greenaway said it. Greenaway said that the statue represents humanity, whereas none of the other characters are humane. That's not a quote, but that's basically what he said. He said, in a way, the statue occupies the place of a jester or a fool.
Right.
The statue is a voyeur and is privileged to see the stuff that the other characters don't see. But my favorite quote that he made about the statue is that everyone in the film behaves like a statue, but the statue is human.
And you know, it is a film, I think, appropriately sometimes described as a drama and comedy, and that is it certainly is an ironic film because there are so many deceptions in it. And there's so many layers of who understands what, but also there's just this slyness about how evil this world is. But it's a kind of comic talkback to them. One of my favorite moments of that is when the statue is part of the wall.
Right.
And only the young orphan nephew is the one who's aware of it, who actually, you know, he's too young to be corrupt. And so he can actually communicate directly with this world in that way of, oh, okay, hey, look, there's all kinds of stuff that's going on here, but in a genuinely innocent way, and he can be playful with it, whereas everything else that's being manipulated is malevolent in one way or another.
Yeah, I've tried to decide if the statue represents, you know, us, the audience, and I don't think it's that cut and dry. I don't think it's that easy.
Well, I agree with you on that. What I would simply add to it is that we, as the audience, are privileged to see it all. That is, it's a bit like plot spoiler coming here from classic film to people. It's like the fact at the end of Citizen Kane, the audience is the only people who know what Rosebud was.
Right.
Nobody else knows what Rosebud is, and we're the only people who get to see both all the conspirators when they're conspiring, because they're at points they're competing conspirators, because we end up having different theories of how somebody can be blackmailed or intimidated from the same drawings.
Right.
But you take the evidence and you configure it in a different way, and you can blackmail this person, or you can intimidate, you know, that person. So here, we get to see it all, not only all the conspirators, but actually the other stuff that's non-conspiratorial, that's happening through the living, the living statue. That there is the possibility of a world different from the scheming of all of these people.
I think so. I think that's one of the characteristics of the living statue, right?
Yeah.
That he also gets to see everything.
Okay.
And is the only character that basically gets to see everything. I mean, he's not in every scene. You know, the scenes that go on behind closed doors, he's not privy to because he's only in the garden.
Right.
But he sees so much more than everybody else sees. Right? And he doesn't take part in anything. Right? I mean, they are completely oblivious, the conspirators are completely oblivious to his presence at the final murder. Right? And we're oblivious too, because we've never seen the horse without the man on it. And when we see his drawing, right, and there's no one mounted on the horse, we get a little bit of a clue.
Right. Absolutely.
Right? But it's not until the body is there and the body's been disposed of in the pond, and that, you know, when he climbs down off the horse, it's a shocking moment.
Absolutely the case.
It's one of the most shocking moments in the film, and the statue really is everywhere.
Well, now you bring up, and this will have to be our last point. I'm going to also introduce something about you, that you're also a professional actor and union member, etc. So one of the things we haven't touched on, and it has to be very, very brief, is actually performance style. We've talked about how they're framed, and all that. So what do you make of how Greenaway has directed the actors in terms of performance style?
I won't say it's naturalistic, because
I hope so.
Because it's so mannerist, right? But I do see an internalization of the characters that is common in naturalistic acting, right? That they are saying on the surface nothing.
Oh, okay.
Right. That they are actually feeling. Everything that they are doing is subtext. Right.
Point well taken. And the interesting point is that can be used, in grunts and groans, dirty kitchen sink naturalistic drama. But here it's done with this artifice, that what they're saying in the artifice has nothing to do with what's really going on.
That's right. Yeah. And I think that there's some masterful acting in this.
Absolutely.
And it's different than, once again, most of the acting that's going on in cinema at the time in 1982, right? It's neither the loud, brash, big budget acting of studio films at the time, or the really naturalistic kind of kind of mumbly acting that you get from a lot of the indie films at the time. It's very, very different and very strange.
Okay, we're going to have to end with very different and very strange. I think it's an appropriate point. If you'd like to know more about City Cinematheque or about City University Television as a whole, there's a way to do it, and that's to visit our website, www.tv.cuny.edu. There you're going to find information about the programming on this series and the programming across our 24x7 offerings. So please visit www.tv.cuny.edu. Michael, always a pleasure to have you here, bringing insight from a number of angles to something like this. Look forward to our next chat together.
Thank you very much, Jerry.
Great. And thank you for joining us here today on City Cinematheque. And please join us again in the future when we continue our stroll through the archives of film history. It's bye for now.